Bob Herbert's op-ed.tv is made possible in part by the CUNY TV Foundation with the support of Ann Ulnick. Hi, I'm Bob Herbert. Welcome to op-ed.tv. Online sex trafficking is one of the great plagues of our time, and the trafficking of children is a cornerstone of that $500 million industry. Advocates will tell you that it is as easy to go online and purchase a child for sex as it is to order a pizza. What is being done about this plague, and what still needs to be done? I'll talk about that with my guests, two ferocious advocates. Dorchen Leidholdt, Director of Battered Women's Legal Services at a group called Sanctuary for Families, and Alexi Ashe Meyers, a former sex crimes prosecutor who is now a staff attorney at Sanctuary for Families. Welcome. Thank you so much for coming in. Alexi, let me start with you. I recently heard an advocate say, and was also in a documentary that we may talk about in a few minutes, that the sex industry has moved from the streets to the internet. Explain how online sex trafficking works.
Well, first of all, that couldn't be more true. There's, I think, a really powerful statistic by the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children that since 2010, cases of sex trafficking has gone up 800%.
Wow.
And they attribute that solely to the internet. Of the thousands of cases they get every year, 75% of those cases involve children who are sold on a website called Backpage.com. And this website makes $150 million a year off these ads selling children for sex.
The fact that so many of these victims are children, Dorchen, how do they manage that? How do children get lured into or brought into or dragged into this industry?
So children are extraordinarily vulnerable, and the children who are being recruited for sex trafficking are the most vulnerable of our children. They're very often children with histories of childhood sexual abuse, children who come from impoverished communities where there is not a lot of family stability, children in foster care. And these children, mostly girls, are recruited by pimps who are sexual predators who often recruit multiple girls. And it usually starts out with, "You're so pretty, and I want to be your daddy, and I want to take care of you." And for the girl, this is a sort of surrogate father, boyfriend, romantic partner. And for the exploiter, the predator, the pimp, this is a money machine. And typically pimps are recruiting multiple girls into this criminal industry. I think what's happened is this has been going on for a long, long time, but as you and Alexi pointed out, it's been happening on street corners or something called the track, where pimps would have their victims walk around. That whole industry has moved online, and it's made it so much easier for traffickers to escape detection, and for sex buyers who are as culpable as traffickers, we actually consider them serial rapists, to escape detection as well. And so the industry has exploded, grievously harming our most vulnerable children.
Now, Alexi, you mentioned Backpage.com, and that's the real elephant in the living room when you're talking about online sex trafficking. Tell us why Backpage.com is such an important component of this story.
Just in my experience as a sex crimes prosecutor, in my cases of human trafficking, there wasn't a single case where the person being exploited wasn't on Backpage.com. Wow. It's just really the cornerstone of where this all happens, and it really has normalized sex buying. We always say now that the person who maybe wasn't willing to go down to a seedy part of town, to the track, to find someone to buy sex from, can now just open their phone and swipe a button and purchase sex. They can do this from their cubicle. They can do it from their home with their wives and their children. It just creates such access that the demand and the supply have to keep up.
So you can have situations where a family is at home and the wife or the mother is in the kitchen or the living room with the kids, and then the father is online, you know, trolling for children.
Yes.
One, I think that a lot of people are not paying attention to this, a lot of ordinary people, but even when it comes up, I think they don't understand the terrible harm that comes to children as a result of these practices. Can either of you talk about sort of the terrible and long-lasting damage that's done to children by this sort of thing?
Well, the harm is devastating to children, and it's sanctuary for families. Last year alone, we provided services to about 400 victims of human trafficking. And so what trafficking is serial rape of a vulnerable person, typically in at least half the cases a child. And that will mean between 5 and 20 rapes a night. Mm-hmm. I mean, we know during this Me Too movement the harm of sexual abuse. Now imagine that magnitude of harm happening every night, night after night, for weeks, months, years. So children are acutely psychologically traumatized. Women are acutely psychologically traumatized. They end up suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, depression, anxiety. They have flashbacks and nightmares. Sometimes they suffer from an acute condition of trauma called traumatic bonding. We might call it Stockholm syndrome, where they end up looking at their abuser as a kind of savior, and that further traps them in the situation of abuse. They are devastated psychologically, often physically. We have trafficking survivor clients who can't really sit because it's so painful for them because of the injury they've suffered. And economically, you don't end up going to school when you're being sex trafficked. You're not starting a new career. So impoverished. And if you look at a lot of the women who end up just trapped in prostitution, it started out with sex trafficking as a child. So it couldn't be more devastating.
Now, in my coverage over the years of prostitution, and in most cases, but not all cases, adults, drug addiction was always a big factor. Is that also a factor with the children?
Thank you, Bob. Thank you for that important point. Absolutely. What happens is pimps and traffickers often push drugs and alcohol because it makes their victims more compliant, as do sex buyers.
It also makes them more reliant on them. To get somebody that you're exploiting addicted to drugs, you are the only source that can get them those drugs. Right. It perpetuates the cycle of keeping them under their control.
And then ultimately what happens is addiction, and it's kind of self-medication. When you're suffering from trauma, you want to medicate. Right. And so it is really a very important part of the harm.
If Backpage.com plays such an enormous role, and I had not heard that statistic when you talked about when you were a sex crimes prosecutor, mm-hmm. How frequently Backpage is involved in those cases.
Yeah.
If they play such an outsized role, why has it been so difficult to hold them to account or call them to account?
That's due to a really outdated internet law called the Communications Indecency Act. It's Section 230. This act was passed in 1996 when the internet was completely different and when this wasn't really a problem. But what that bill does is it allows websites like Backpage.com to escape liability for hosting ads selling children or women for sex, based on an immunity it gives them that they're just a host of these ads. So we are working really hard to pass legislation called the Stop Enabling Sex Trafficking Act of 2017. It's a bipartisan bill that was introduced this August, and it would narrowly amend that Communications Decency Act so that websites who knowingly facilitate human trafficking can be held liable for that. And it's really needed because historically when victims have brought cases against Backpage.com, courts have ruled that they're immune under the CDA Section 230. And they have now pointed the Jane Doe victims to go to Congress and get this amended.
So there's a very compelling documentary called I Am Jane Doe, which covers a tremendous amount of the things that we're talking about, including focusing on victims of sex trafficking. And one of the things that seemed to be clear from the documentary was that Backpage.com doesn't seem to just be sort of a passive actor here where ads come in for saying that these are escorts or whatever the ads say. According to the documentary, Backpage.com actually shapes the wording of ads, edits ads, or whatever to conceal the fact that so many of these folks are underage. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, there was a 2-year investigation into Backpage by a Senate subcommittee. The report found that Backpage knowingly facilitates human trafficking. By some of the things they do is when they get an ad for somebody that they see under 17, rather than deleting that ad and reporting it, they help the traffickers amend the ad to make the person look 19, for example. So they actually assist traffickers in evading liability by law enforcement.
So why isn't that a crime?
It is a crime. It should be a crime, but they are, they've escaped liability so far.
Well, so you mentioned the Senate investigation. So there's the Senate subcommittee looking at this. I think John McCain and Claire McCaskill are actually on that subcommittee. Mm-hmm. They subpoenaed executives from Backpage.com. Tell us what happened.
They didn't show. There was an empty bench. And then later on, they just pled the fifth and didn't answer it.
Yeah, so they finally had to be tracked down and more or less hauled in, and then they pled the fifth. So where do things stand now in terms of this potential legislation?
It has 65 co-sponsors in the Senate. It needs to be moved to the floor for a vote, but we still need the House to pass it, and we need everyone to call their representatives and urge them to pass SESTA. Can
you talk a little bit about the crime issue, the criminal justice aspect? Whether Backpage.com is involved or not, what we've got here is trafficking in children. So what are law enforcement agencies doing? The police, the FBI, prosecutors, that sort of thing. Who do they target, and are they having any success?
Well, historically, they've targeted the low-hanging fruit. Mm-hmm. And historically, they've targeted principally the vulnerable victims and arrested people for prostitution. Sometimes they target the Johns as well, the sex buyers, but usually they don't use technology to investigate. They don't do sting operations. It's beginning to change. Really smart law enforcement leaders are beginning to understand that this investigations have to happen a very different way. The internet is key to it all. There's an enormous amount of evidence. I guess the upside of this horrific situation is there is an enormous amount of evidence. It lives on the internet, and smart prosecutors are learning how to go after it aggressively. In Seattle, Washington, for example, where there has been this enormous uptick in internet sex trafficking, largely because of the presence of big technology companies there. A brilliant prosecutor named Val Ritchie has been using new techniques, going on to, these sex buyers communicate with each other on things called John's boards, where they review the women whose bodies they buy in some of the most horrific, humiliating, degrading ways possible, but that's also evidence of criminal activity. But increasingly, of course it's important to go after the traffickers. They are serial perpetrators, but so are the buyers as well. And the demand is the economic engine of this multi-billion-dollar-a-year criminal industry. And going after the demand side is they are the weak link in the criminal chain, because these are not career criminals for the most part, these sex buyers. These are guys with jobs who want to hold on to those jobs, and they are vulnerable to law enforcement interventions. So in our city, in New York City, our police commissioner is taking this seriously. Implementation sometimes is a little slower than we would want it to be, but we're beginning to see change from law enforcement. We're beginning to see law enforcement get it.
Well, in the years I mentioned covering prostitution and related crimes over several years, actually. One of the things I never could quite understand was why, because in many cases the prostitutes were arrested and went to jail in many cases.
Yes.
I never understood why more Johns weren't prosecuted, and it was almost as though it was a cultural phenomenon that we leave the Johns out of it. Where did that come from, and is that still the case?
Well, it's time-honored and historic, and the responsibility has been shifted to these vulnerable people in prostitution. And now we know that the vast majority are trafficking victims, and if they're not trafficking victims, they're incredibly vulnerable and usually have histories of sexual abuse. And the Johns have been seen, well, I think a lot of people in law enforcement have identified with Johns. Some, sadly, have been perpetrators themselves. It's been normalized, sex buying. But we're beginning to see a paradigm shift. And the leaders of this city are beginning to get it. We've heard from the mayor, we've heard from the first lady, we've heard from Commissioner O'Neill as well. And but getting it to trickle down into the ranks, I mean, it's very clear that we need police force-wide training about this issue and this problem, and laws on the books need to be enforced. In 2007, we raised the penalty for patronizing a person in prostitution from a B misdemeanor to an A misdemeanor. It's now a more serious crime.
Right.
We just haven't seen the enforcement we need, and we need police to be sophisticated, partnering with prosecutors in conducting online investigations. Like our Kathleen Rice, Representative Kathleen Rice did that. And actually, she ended up taking down pillars of the community in Nassau County.
Right.
We need for that to happen here.
Which is an indication of how widespread this is, how many men from how many different communities are actually participating in this sort of thing.
I mean, most men don't buy sex. Men who buy sex have very troubling attitudes about women. They report more sexual aggression, more likelihood to commit acts of rape. A big concern of ours is if we're seeing this tremendous increase in sex buying on the internet, that's normalizing sex buying for the male population.
Right.
I mean, we worry about these young men in the tech industry that are doing it, and you know, at the same time that we're combating these attitudes that women should be abused with Me Too, we see this big criminal industry promoting those very attitudes. So it is worrisome, and that's why SESTA is so critically important. It combats that normalization of sexual exploitation.
Now, I describe the two of you as ferocious advocates, and I stand by that. But you didn't start out, I don't think, either of you, on the issue of child sex trafficking. How did you come to be involved in this, and did this happen independently, or did you guys do it together?
My first interest out of law school was in human trafficking. And I was working for an organization that combated human trafficking in Southeast Asia. And as I was there and learning about the epidemic of trafficking and how it also affected what was happening right here in New York City, I wanted to find a job that combated that locally. So I started at the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office right away in the Human Trafficking Division, and have not left the human trafficking arena.
My story goes back, Bob, to the mid-'80s. I was working on issues of violence against women and girls, and I met a woman who had been trafficked as a child. Classic story. She was being sexually abused at home by her stepfather. She ran away from home. She was picked up by pimps. They gang raped her. They seasoned her into prostitution. And back then, the word trafficking wasn't used in describing her experience. Right. She was seen as a bad girl, a juvenile delinquent, a child prostitute. She was my friend, and she was my teacher about really the brutality of this industry, its pervasiveness, and inspired and motivated me to take on this issue.
Now, you've been talking about the importance of technology. In most cases, these are technological advancements. This is a perverse use of those advances. But the giant tech providers who we all use and in many cases are crazy about, they are not without some responsibility here. How should we look at them if we're talking about Google or search engines or other providers?
Well, they have enormous responsibility. I mean, and they have, you know, with the kind of power and wealth that they have comes great responsibility to affect positive social change. Sadly, historically, they've been a big part of the problem, and many have been fighting the kind of legislative reform, have been fighting SESTA in the halls of Congress, sometimes covertly and sometimes quite overtly.
If we're talking about ordinary people who are concerned about these issues, and they're using technology, you know, in many cases all day, every day, what can they do? How can they take the next step and express their concern or do something constructive to either bring attention to or get in touch with people who can help in this fight against child sex trafficking?
I think right now the most important thing is to reach out to their members of Congress and to urge them to pass SESTA. But in day-to-day, social media is so powerful. There's so much good information out there that can be buried in bad information, but share it. If you have a lot of followers, share the good information. We made a public service announcement about passing SESTA and the need for the amendment. We can find that online. If you Google Amy Schumer public service announcement SESTA, share that, just educate people. And there's no one who hears about this who doesn't want to help.
Right.
You can't hear about children being sold online and not want to be involved and help.
Educate yourself and educate your community, and start by watching I Am Jane Doe. It's available on Netflix. It is so gripping, and if you're involved in legal issues, it's like a legal thriller, but it is the real story. There's an extraordinary woman, Mary Mazzio, who was a law firm partner, who has now made this her mission in life to pass SESTA and to effect reform in this area.
Talk a little bit about I Am Jane Doe. Do you know how this documentary came about and what it's trying to achieve?
Mary had gotten I believe this is correct, gotten a call from someone, have you seen these cases in Boston of these Jane Does trying to sue Backpage? And there was a huge law firm, Ropes and Gray, attached to it. And
excuse me, the Jane Does were young girls, they're still girls.
Absolutely.
Who had been trafficked and managed to get out of it.
Yes. And it just sparked her interest. Why is this happening? Why is this huge law firm attached? And she started researching and just couldn't leave the issue alone. She had to do something about it. And really to have her legal expertise and background combined with her filmmaking skills really produced a powerful, beautiful piece.
It really is. And it's also, in addition to the I'm always looking for a great story. In addition to being an incredibly powerful story, it's such an instructive documentary. We've run out of time, much to my chagrin, so thank you, Dorchen Leidholdt, Alexi Ashe Meyers. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
We'll be back in a moment with a final word. Can this be true? 72% of adults who identify themselves as Republican believe that Donald Trump is a good role model for children. Really? Yes, really, according to the highly respected Quinnipiac University poll. Most Americans, 53%, think Trump is an embarrassment. And nearly all Democrats, an incredible 99%, reject the idea that America's tweeter-in-chief could somehow be considered a good role model for kids. But Republicans were not to be swayed. It didn't matter what Mr. Trump has said about unwanted groping, or his disgraceful characterization of African countries, or his wholehearted support of an accused child molester's quest for a seat in the United States Senate. I could go on and on. None of that matters to the party that spent decades howling in high-pitched hypocrisy about its embrace of family values. What was heartening about the poll was that the Republicans were definite outliers. Most groups are deeply unhappy about the environment and the tone that Trump has brought to Washington and the rest of the country. 60% of those surveyed said he is not honest. Nearly 60% said he lacks decent leadership skills. 57% said he does not care about ordinary Americans. Only 27% said they are proud to have Donald Trump as their president. This poll shores up a belief I've had for a long time, despite recent Republican successes. The Republican Party, as presently constituted, and its adherents, are on the wrong side of history. They may be wreaking havoc now, but Americans of goodwill, in step with the prevailing forces of our time, will soon cast this band of miscreants aside. Bet on it. That's all for now. See you next time.